Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Somehow, as you might notice, my connection today is not the fastest, so I wanted to show myself at the beginning of this webinar and say hello to you, and then I will turn off my my webcam now so that you're going to be able at least to hear me. Apologies for that. Sometimes the internet connection is a little bit unreliable, and today is one of these days. Nevertheless, we are here together and we will cover the topic today, the impact of protected new plant varieties in the European Union market. I have with me my friend and colleague Ursula Lamberti from the CPBO. Thank you very much, Ursula, for being with us today. It's a pleasure for me and also for the participant. Thanks a lot. Before, however, I give you the word, just have a couple of minutes of patience, because I will introduce all participants to the topic and tool that we are using today, which is GoToWebinar. You might have already noticed that you have been muted. This is because we don't want to interrupt or disturb our speaker with the background noises that we might be generating throughout the presentation, and therefore your microphone is off and you have no way of turning it on. However, you're very welcome to ask questions if you'd like so, and you can simply type your question in a drop-down window you see on the right-hand side of the screen. You have in your own language written questions, like German is Fragen or domande in Italian, for example, and you can type them in there. I will gather all these questions, and at the end of the webinar, we are going to have a Q&A session. In this Q&A session, we are going to, of course, do our best to answer to all your questions. Now, the most frequently asked questions that we always receive is, when are you going to receive your follow-up with the PDF file of the presentation, as well as the links that will allow you to watch the webinar later on whenever you'd like, and also to distribute the link if you'd like to. That is going to happen this afternoon. We need to cut a little bit the recording, and then we are going to send it to you as soon as possible. Now, having said, also the last thing is that the webinar is recorded, but we do that for your own advantage, because then we're going to be able to send you the slides and the recording, so you're going to have a perpetual, so to say, source of knowledge to watch whenever you'd like. Regarding the European IP Help Desk, we are a service initiative of the European Commission, whose main objective is to help potential beneficiaries of EU-funded projects, as well as researchers of small and medium enterprises across the European Union, understanding and using intellectual property and intellectual property rights. These are the main three categories that statistically request our services the most. However, the services are open to all physical and juridical persons who might somehow have some sorts of questions regarding IP and IPR. So if you have one, and even if you're not part of these categories, or also you are simply a physical person, you can gladly address us with your problems or concerns. We are free of charge first line support on IP and IPR, meaning that all the services you see on the right hand side of the screen here are offered completely free of charge. However, it's a first line support, meaning that we are not substituting the work that patent attorneys are doing. So, for example, the help desk is not going to file a patent application for you or write the document and the claims for you, just to give you an example. We can, however, inform you regarding the patent discipline in the European Union and whether you might have something in your hand that could be protectable. Just also to give you an example, we do that through these small services clouds you see on the right hand side of the screen. Probably the cornerstone of all these services is the website. Website is ec.europa.eu/ip-helpdesk. Through this website, you can have access to the different services, which are trainings. For example, today is one of our special trainings that we organize throughout the years, but there are also regular, for example, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. We're going to be present again. Publications also are available, and you can download them completely free of charge and also distribute them to your network without any form of limitations. We have an ambassador scheme throughout the European Union. We're present at European Commission events throughout the EU, and probably most importantly, we have a helpline that answers to your specific questions, and they do that within 3 working days. They try to be as understandable as possible. We suggest you write your questions in English, but they also speak different languages than English. I will provide you with the contacts also of the helpline later on in the upcoming slides. The territorial coverage of the European IP Help Desk is the European Union plus COSME-related countries, like, for example, the United Kingdom, Norway, Switzerland, Turkey, Israel, and so on and so forth. If you need information that go beyond this territorial boundaries, then there are our siblings active in the different geographical areas of the world, like the China, India, Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America IP SME Help Desk. They can provide you info on intellectual property rights in the specific areas where they are located. These are the new upcoming, the e-learning and publications and guides and topic, country, sector specific fact sheets, as well as infographic and case studies that you can find on our website. The newborn among them is the Guide to Intellectual Property Management in Horizon Europe. This is a very, very new publication. Actually, it has been published last week, and here we make a point regarding the main intellectual property issues that have to do with Horizon Europe, the new research funding program of the European Commission. This was our fruitful collaboration with the Community Plant Variety Office and COPORA throughout the year 2022. We very much hope we're going to have the chance to do the same in 2023. It's been a real pleasure, and as you can see, we have gotten to the 6th of December, which is our last appointment. However, if you'd like to watch the previous webinars that we have organized and carried out together, you are very welcome to do so. You can simply visit our website, the e-learning page, and you can have access to all the webinars that we have done together, or you can also write us an email, and you can simply write an email to answering to the follow-up email that you're going to receive after the webinar, or on the follow-up email there is going to be a link that will guide you to the e-learning page. Simply by clicking on that link, you can have access to all these webinars you can see in here. As I said, we also have ambassadors across the European Union. They are a very, very important pillar of the services of the European IP Help Desk, and they might be very near to your current location. So if you check out in our website, the ambassador scheme, you may find some of the ambassadors nearby to your place. They are experts in the intellectual property field, as well as members of the Enterprise Europe Network, meaning that they can be useful understanding IP and IPR, but also very useful in finding potential collaboration partners across the European Union. So just give it a try and see whether perhaps you know one of them, or if they are near to your location. I left a couple of further learning opportunities here in this page. Some of them are more theoretical, like the European Union Intellectual Property Office Learning Portal, or the European Patent Office Academy, or also the World Intellectual Property Organizations Academy. Some others are more hands-on support by experts, for example, the Horizon IP Scan, about which I'd like to spend a couple of words. And if you are a small and medium enterprise who's part of, for example, a Horizon Europe project, and you are in the first 6 months of that project, you can request to have to be supported by an expert that you're going to be able to choose among 3 potential experts whose names are going to be provided to you. With these experts, you can have a pre-interview where you explain to him or her which problems you think you might find in terms of IP. In the collaboration, the expert is going to prepare him or herself on such topics, and you're going to have a 3 hours long interview where the problematics are going to be discussed and potentially, hopefully, solved. Then there is going to be a reporting in which the expert is going to write down in a report what has been carried out, and a final debriefing where you can further ask questions on such report. We're going to have a dedicated webinar on the functioning of the Horizon IP scan on the 14th of December. And so if you'd like and you have time to join us and you're interested to this initiative, check it out also on the website www.horizon-ipscan.eu. Again, the context of the European IP Help Desk, if you are eager to know more about the services, some info that I wasn't able to give to you in these 12 minutes I've been talking, it's www.ec.europa.eu/IP-helpdesk, and also the helpline to ask questions if you'd like to, helpline@iprhelpdesk.eu, and the training account in order to request, for example, access to the previous trainings that have taken place, training@iprhelpdesk.eu. Then we have a Twitter and LinkedIn account as well. And that is it with the boring part. Now I'm going to leave the word to the CPVO and to Ursula. Thank you very much once again, Ursula, for joining.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure. I really hope that you can see me. I'm gonna give it a try with sharing both the screen and myself. So we'll see if the connection holds that. I hope that you can see my screen, please.
I do.
You do? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So you should also see the presentation.
It's perfect. I see you, the
Yeah,
screen, and I also hear you. So you're
that's
set to go.
fantastic. Okay, so we can start the presentation. First of all, I just want to thank the help desk. As you see, we organized a lot of activities during 2022. We also hope to do the same next year. This has been a very fruitful collaboration. It was a really nice occasion to talk about plant variety rights and how they're not a standalone right, how they overlap with other intellectual property rights, geographical indication, trademarks, patents. And today we have the opportunity to understand what's their impact in the European Union market from an economic point of view and an environmental point of view, if they have any impact. But spoiler, they do. So I will start from the outline. Today's presentation is somehow very straightforward. It's going to be quite short, and it's straight to the point, and it will remind you a little bit the main features of the CPVR system, just as a refresh. Then we will talk about the impact of the plant variety protection in the EU economy, and then on environment and society. We will, of course, draw some conclusions. Okay, so today we will not talk about the impact of plant variety protection in the European Union from a theoretical point of view, because that's a contract theory that I will tackle in a second, but we will talk about numbers and data and what we could find also thanks to the collaboration between the CPVO and UIPO, the European Union Intellectual Property Office, that became reality in a study. Before talking about the study, I will make some general considerations on the plant variety protection in the European Union in general, and then I will provide you with some general considerations on the study. Okay, plant variety protection in the European Union. You may remember this slide if you saw the introduction to plant variety rights, and this is the legal framework here. What's important to remember is this part and this part of the graph. We have the UPOV Convention, which is like our WIPO when it's compared to patents and trademarks, is the international convention on which all the system is based, of which the European Union is signatory member state as of 2005. And then we have EU regulation, this regulation that we call the basic regulation, that is a little bit the Bible of plant variety rights in the European Union. These are the, I will be very brief about that, because if you're interested in a more in-depth analysis, you can definitely watch the introduction to community plant variety system in the European Union. But these are the main features that I would like to highlight today. First of all, it's a sui generis system, which means that it does overlap with patents. It may overlap with trademarks and have some relationship with geographical indication, but it's a different type of intellectual property protection. It's sui generis because when the European Union countries signed that UPOV convention that you saw before, they actually made a choice. The TRIPS agreements that establish intellectual property protection in all the signatory member states gave the opportunity to all countries to choose between patent protection for plants and plant variety protection. And the choice in the European Union is clear. This is not the same choice of other countries like the US, for instance, where the two systems coexist. The object of protection is innovative varieties, so new plants, not traditional varieties, not amateur varieties. So this is very important because plant variety protection gives an opportunity to those breeders who are innovator to get protection on the EU market. So, but without encroaching what is traditional knowledge, traditional production of plants, or as geographical indication do, for instance, they do not really tackle the traditional specialities and the products of a region. No, it's for new plants. Again, it's based on UPOV 1991 Act. There are several versions of this international convention, and the protection has a uniform effect in all the member states of the European Union. It works as European Union trademarks and community design. It means that you apply for protection at the CPVO, at the Community Plant Variety Office where I work, and then you get protection in all the 27 member states of the European Union automatically. The registration in the CPVR register is not a requirement for commercialization. It is very important that we make a distinction between the register of innovative varieties, so those varieties that present something new and they can pertain to all crops, and the requirement for marketing authorization. Now, this is similar to pharmaceutical products. One thing is whether the variety is innovative, and one thing is whether it can be put on the market. It is important to remember that this is not applicable to all species. For instance, for ornamental crops, there is no need to register a variety in the common catalog, for instance, is the commercialization register, but for some food species, this is necessary. This is a food safety requirement. It has nothing to do with whether the variety is innovative or not. So there is an overlap, but they're not absolutely the same thing. We have to remember that varieties of all botanical genera and species may be protected. So the Community Plant Variety Office has a very important job, which is to ensure the breeders, no matter the species, so it can be vegetable, can be ornamentals, can be protected and can have something back from the investment that he carried out when developing the new variety. We received applications for more than 200 species, 2,000 species. 200 wouldn't be as impressive, and it's not limited to varieties that can be grown in the European Union. So it's not an innovative variety is not necessarily a variety that is endemic to the European Union. It's not about what can be grown in the European Union as per the climatic conditions that we have, but it's about what it can be commercialized in the European Union. So also tropical species can be protected, any kind of species really. So now I would like to talk about the general remarks of the studies, but why did we start, did we embark in this adventure? As in all intellectual property rights, we have a theory that stands on the basis of the protection, which is the social contract theory. As a reminder, on one side, we provide a monopoly to the innovator, in our case, the breeder. And on the other side, the breeder, the innovator, as it happens in patent, commits to share the innovation, so the new plant variety, with the society. This social contract, this exchange that happens between society and the innovator, has the only purpose to ensure that the innovator is awarded with benefits when it comes to the commercialization of his innovation, and on the other side, the society can benefit from progress. So intuitively, in principle, we know that providing protection on new plant varieties should benefit the breeders, should encourage innovation. But did we have numbers about it? Can we prove that this is indeed the case, at least in the European Union? So this is why the CPVO, after some years of negotiations, decided together with UIPO, in particular the observatory of the UIPO, to produce this study. I say after a few years because you have to remember that finding the data in a somehow uncharted sector like is the plant innovation sector is not always easy. But this is the first study in many, many years of this kind. We have to remind that there was a study on the same subject produced by UPOV, so the international convention that we were mentioning before, but that dated back 2005, so it was not up to date anymore, and it referred to the beginning of the implementation of the convention. So we needed to quantify on one side whether community plant variety rights are a good deal, so they have a beneficial effect on society, because this is the mission of the community plant variety office. This is the final purpose of the social contract, like we were saying before, the benefit for society. So we went to this study to check whether this is the case. So whether there is indeed, I'll go back a second. So there is indeed a benefit from an economic point of view, but the economic point of view is not the only one that is valuable for us. We also have to consider that we are in a very specific situation with climate change, changing the rules of the game all the time, and we also have to take into consideration the environmental impact of plant variety protection, or in general protected plant varieties in the European Union. So these are a couple of pictures from the event of 28th of April 2022, when the study was launched. As you can see, we have two representatives of the office, Community Plant Variety Office, and of the UIPO Observatory. This is very briefly the structure of the study. What we're interested in today is quantitative results. So I will not bore you with how they got the data. It was a very hard job. It took us like a year. The Community Plant Variety Office supported the economists and the very skilled professionals from the observatory to apply the methodology and data and check, retrieve the data in general. So today we will focus on these quantitative results. A couple of words on the methodology though, and what's interesting in here is how do we determine whether something is beneficial or not for society? What we try to do is to use this computable equilibrium model, which is a comparison between the theoretical economy and actual data, and to see whether there is an impact on the production, the impact of the increased production on the economy. No? We will talk about the increased production in a couple of slides. And for the impact on the environment, what was interesting was to check whether there was an increased productivity due to innovation. This is important because increased productivity in certain terms means being able to do more, to produce more with less input. This is environmental friendly in some cases. We will see in what terms. These are the sources that we use. You see some registers of IP rights, but also trademarks and demographic and financial data of the breeders. Breeders, of course, companies and also physical people, physical persons. The scope of the study. We mentioned before that community plant variety rights protect all crops with absolutely no discrimination, but we also mentioned that there is a difficulty in gathering the data. So to be completely transparent, this study, in order to be finalized in a certain time limit, tackle a very high percentage of species, but not all species. In particular, you will see that ornamentals are treated as one single species, but this is not the case. Ornamentals do satisfy a common function, but we cannot consider all the species the same. We have flowers, we have bushes, we have different kind of ornamentals. They are not propagated in the same way, and especially they do not have the very same market. They do not respond to the very same market logics. However, for this first study, for this first approach, we focused a little bit more on these vegetable, fruit, and agricultural crops. They do not cover all the agricultural crops in here, but the most important, you can see already, wheat and corn and barley, and the basic cereals that compose a very important part of our diet. And this is important because we also want to check they are an important part of our diet, which means that the impact on the environment of the European Union is very important, and the impact on the production is very important, therefore, on the economy. So the indicators that we used, first of all, we started from an assumption that was found, that can be found in this 2005 study from UPOV that I was mentioning before, and is indeed the fact that breeders do not choose to protect any new variety that they come across or they consider to have created, but especially those titles are applied for when it comes to varieties that are considered to be beneficial, no? That can create profits. And this means that the number of applications, which in principle may be as per se meaningless, is indeed a good indicator of the benefits that the plant variety protection system can produce. Here we also have to distinguish between the breeder's perspective and the grower's perspective. The breeder's is the innovator, right? So of course the protection is an option that is exercised when there is a tangible market value. So when the breeder considers that that new variety can indeed produce him some money, and there is a return in the form of royalties. On the other side, this is important also for growers, because when given the choice, growers do prefer protected varieties. The reason is very simple, that protected varieties show to be more resilient, more productive, or more appreciated by consumers. So growers in general are available to pay royalties in order to have superior and better quality varieties. Okay, so let's start with the second section of this presentation about the impact on economy of plant variety rights. One of the approaches that was taken in this study, and is very interesting, is a sort of a contrario argument, right? And the economists of the UIPO Observatory try to calculate the impact of plant breeding progress if the impact in the situation where plant breeding progress did not happen. Well, you read it on the slide. In any case, we try to focus on the quantity of crops that would not have been produced and the hypothetical missing volume attributable to protected varieties. So this is a very complex calculation, because we try to imagine theoretical scenarios where indeed there was no plant breeding. This is quite relevant, because sometimes one of the questions that we receive at the community plant variety office is, why do we need innovation? Do we really need new plant varieties? Aren't we okay with the traditional ones or the ones that are already on the market? Well, this calculation, this approach really tries to determine in that situation what would have been, how the agricultural sector would have looked like. So here you can see some data. In the absence of the CPVR system in 2020, the production in the EU would have been sensibly lower. And there is also breakdown for crops. And it's particularly interesting when it comes to ornamentals that really have received a lot of investment when it comes to plant breeding, because they are very profitable crops. This makes me think that maybe a follow-up study should focus on the ornamentals. The key findings on the economic contribution: what did we learn in studying all the data, in imagining alternative scenarios where plant breeding never happened? Well, first of all, we were able to determine that the additional production brought about by EU protected plant variety innovation is sufficient to feed 57 million people with arable crops, 38 with fruit crops, and 28 million for vegetable crops. So one of the most important objectives that plant breeding is able to carry out, to perform, is the fact to allow our society to feed a higher number of people, a higher population, which allows the European Union to be less dependent on other countries and import in general. But this is not enough, of course, for determining that plant breeding and protected plant breeding is beneficial for society. There is also the calculation of the added value in the GDP contribution that was estimated around 13 billion euros. Of course, if we compare it with the automotive sectors or other sectors, this is not as impressive. However, you have to remember that this is the GDP that allows to feed such a big part of the population. So it's one of the ones that worth more. And it was also possible to determine that the additional production resulted in a higher employment rate of jobs that are better remunerated. We will see in what terms in a second. So this is how the yield growth was distributed among crops. And the next two slides are very interesting in my personal opinion, and we see the relationship between the input use, which is declining, and the yield increasing. This is something that we were mentioning before. We were able to determine that is indeed possible right now today to produce more with less, and thus going towards a more sustainable agriculture. We had yield per se, so we could not only calculate whether we were able to produce more. And this is why it was necessary when carrying out the study to deduct this factor that is called agricultural intensification, because it's possible to produce more wheat, more corn, simply slaving out people, simply increasing input, so putting more fertilizer, putting more land use. Deforestation is one of these examples. We get rid of the forest, we produce more agricultural land, and thus we produce more. But this was not what was important for the aim of our study, and this is not what plant breeding is looking for. What we are looking for is to try to use the same arable land and produce the same quantity, if not more. So we have to factor out this agricultural intensification to be more precise. And these are the number that we were able to determine, and indeed the yield, in the yield we were able to observe an increase in all the sectors, in particular in ornamental, which is something to be studied, but in all the sectors in general. As per the share of protected agricultural varieties to take into account for the effect, this was also another very interesting approach. What did we do? What did the observatory of UIPO did was to study the impact of protected variety crop by crop. So here we can see that, for instance, in the agricultural crops, meaning all the cereals and the oilseed and the feed for animals, and 25% of all the varieties are indeed protected. We can see that the percentage goes sensibly lower when it comes to fruit, but you also have to consider that, first of all, fruit have a longer breeding process, and is a crop that is on the rising a rising star of the last years. But still, the percentage is important. We have a higher percentage when it comes to vegetables, so we have almost 20% is protected. And for ornamentals, well, they're very profitable, so we have an even higher share. So these are non-food products. So once again, my personal opinion is that a follow-up study on this specific crop would be only but beneficial. As per the geographical origin, we were also interested in knowing who protects, which are the countries where protected innovation is more present, those countries who invest more in research and development, of course, in professionals. This is not only the activity of a company, but it's also training professionals. And with no surprise, we find the Netherlands, which is in the European Union, despite the very limited amount of land, is really able to invest a lot in research and development in new plant varieties. The total number of CPVR, as you can see, is almost 30,000, and the largest share is, of course, of EU countries. And the size of CPVR holders. Why do we focus on the size of the holders? Why do we care about who's owning this innovation? Well, this is actually very important, because if we want to establish what's the impact of plant variety protection on the economy, we need to know who are the players who are playing the game. And this is also in part a reply to some observations that we receive on the fact that only big multinationals, or only the 3 or 4 best known one do hold plant variety protection, and thus a monopoly, which is a monopoly, let's remind it, that is limited in time, but is still a monopoly. What we were able to establish is that actually the majority of CPVR in terms of quantity, are owned by small and medium enterprises, if not by individuals. We will talk about this in a second. We mentioned this data before, and it's about the job creation. If we want to establish what's the impact on the economy, we do not only have to focus on the profit, but we also have to focus on whether there are more people employed in this sector. And we were able to do a total of over 900,000 extra jobs. And what's interesting is that this, not only the turnover is better, not only more people are employed in the agricultural sector because of plant breeding, but these jobs are paid better, at least 12% more. This was, it was possible to establish this, at least in the agricultural and horticultural sector. Okay, as we said before, we do not only care about how much money we make, but it's also extremely important to understand whether this business model, this kind of protection, is also beneficial when it comes to the environment. I will start from this map that was drawn by my colleague, and it's about the water stress by country in 2040. We are about to face an extremely difficult situation. You know it very well. I don't have to break the news to you. But climate change and the change of climatic condition is putting under a very hard try many countries, and you can see that certain areas of the world are under certain water stress. What is the solution to this? Well, there is no silver bullet in this case, but plant breeding and the creation of more resilient plant varieties is a possible solution when it comes to these countries that are undergoing more and more water stress. There is the possibility through plant breeding to create plant varieties that are more resilient in the sense that they need less water. And what's the European Union? We know this in the European Union, no? So the European Commission already committed through the European Union Green Deal, the Biodiversity Strategy, and the Farm to Fork Strategy. These are extremely complex policy documents that, sorry, these are very complex, sorry. policy documents that have a certain number of objectives. Here, for instance, you have a zero pollution Europe. Agriculture, of course, is not the only factor, but is a very important factor in the production of pollution. The transition to a circular economy, this is more about the implementation of the agricultural models in society, financing transition and the green common agricultural policy. But all of these objectives, when it comes to the keeping of biodiversity and the food production, are embedded in these two other strategies, which are the biodiversity and the farm to fork. What's particularly relevant is the farm to fork strategy, which is a policy document that invites, well, it's more than inviting, but it sets as objective to create a food chain that is fair for breeder, that is fair for growers, that is also more secure for consumers. And one of the instruments that can be used in order to achieve this goal, climate neutrality, a more fair food chain, is innovation when it comes to plant variety protection. So this is from the point of view of the European Union policies, but there is also a very important aspect that has to be taken into consideration when it comes to international policies. And here I would like to stress the link between the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations, and the protection of plant variety rights. This is very well summarized in this slide that is produced also by UPOV and explained in this following slide. Here we put some of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and we try to explain how plant variety innovation can allow reaching this kind of goal. Well, first of all, for no poverty, it is possible through plant variety rights protection to have an increased farm incomes, because farmers are allowed to have access to higher quality crops that make that can be more profitable. There is also the possibility, this is in between zero hunger and no poverty, there is the possibility when we're able to produce more with less, not only to be more sustainable, but also to allow an increased population to have more affordable food. Basically, if we are able to produce more, we have the triggering of scale economy, or very basically, if we are able to produce in the European Union, we're less dependent on other countries, and the distance that our food has to go through is shorter, so we can have access to this kind of food for a lower price. There is also another SDG, that is number 8, is decent work and economic growth. Of course, technology per se is a neutral tool. So in economic growth that is also decent and sustainable is not only about the tools that are used. So plant variety innovation per se cannot ensure that this objective is reached. However, can be an extremely important tool to get a more sustainable agriculture, to doing more with less, to get more resilient crops, and to ensure a sustainable economic growth. A responsible consumption is on the same line, of course. The technology is neutral per se, but it can be an instrument in that direction. Climate action, we explained this in a very and we mentioned this a couple of slides before. There is the possibility to create more resilient crops and also life on land. And this makes me think of, for instance, the production that does not require the use of pesticides. There is the possibility indeed through plant varieties, through plant breeding, to develop varieties that are naturally resistant to certain pests. This means that agriculture becomes more sustainable not only because of the input, but on the inputs on the soil, so water, air, land, etc., but also because it needs less chemicals. Key finding, what we found out investigating through this study. We found out that it was possible to establish that greenhouse gases emission were reduced thanks to innovative varieties and varieties that are protected. We were able to establish that the equivalent was the total of Portugal's GHG footprint. We also focused on water use, and it was possibly to see that in agriculture and horticulture, so not for crops, but just for one part of crops, we had a reduced water use of 14 billion cubic meters. Finally, land use and biodiversity. It is intuitive that we can sustain biodiversity through innovation and a more responsible use of resources. However, there was the possibility to establish that through plant breeding, through innovative varieties, there was the prevention of the conversion of a size of islands territory in grassland. Final considerations. So I bored you enough with numbers and graphs, etc. But this is very important because when we want to draw conclusions, we need proof, we need evidence, we need robust arguments in order to see whether the system is working, whether the system is still responding to the new challenges, because it was established in the end of the 90s. So we need to make sure that the system is still replying and providing solution also in completely different, or not completely different, but slightly different climatic conditions, social conditions, geopolitical situations. Right? So for farmers and growers, we could establish that across the EU, they could benefit from the innovation. It is clear, but now we have the proof of that, the breeders also can benefit from the protection of new plant varieties. And the big discovery, well, we knew that before, we had this impression, but now we have it in numbers, that small and medium enterprises in the European Union are extremely innovative. They invest a lot of their turnover in innovation, in creating new plant varieties. They are, and they hold the majority of the CPVR, the community plant variety rights. End to end, just as a summary of what we were discussing here before, we see that plant variety innovation must support a low input agriculture. Is what I was saying before, do more with less. And what's really important beside the yield, so besides producing more wheat, more corn, so that we can have more pasta, more pizza, more quesadilla, there is also the necessity to create varieties that are resilient to biotic and abiotic stress. What's the difference between these kind of stresses? Biotic is basically based on life. So we talk about bacteria, viruses, pests in general, and abiotic stresses is what climate change is causing, no? Unpredictability, less water use, droughts, etc. In the context of climate change, for instance, these are the traits that we are looking for, but not only. And another final consideration is that legislation must drive innovation. Of course, we have a system and we were able to establish that after 25 years, it's still working, it's still fit for purpose. However, the legislation has to be able to respond not only the strategies of the European Union, not only the SDG of the United Nations, but also the legislation, the regulation, the national legislation, the directives need to respond to new needs and changing geopolitical situation. And this is why we have some reforms in the pipeline, not today, not tomorrow, in a couple of months, but the Commission is working in establishing whether the CBVR system is fit for purpose, whether the plant reproductive material marketing, the marketing authorization that we were mentioning before, is indeed still fit for purpose, and when it comes to new technologies, new approaches in producing new plant varieties, whether the regulatory framework of gene editing is still responding to the needs of a population and the geopolitical needs of the European Union. And with this, I am done with my presentation. I think I can stop sharing my screen. I hope I am.
Yes, you have.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going now to take back control. 1 second. And now you should be able to see my screen with questions. Well, the first question is, when are you going to receive the slides and the recording of today's webinar? I said it, but some of you have connected a little later, so I will repeat it, and that is going to happen at the latest tomorrow morning, but hopefully before that. And the second question was, where is it possible to read the full study? Maybe I can put it in the follow-up email as well, just a small link.
Yes, our studies on our website. However, the idea is indeed to share the link together with the presentation so that you can have a good read in the details.
We'll do. We'll put it in the follow-up email. Also because slides anyway, and so with the slides you can also send the link, and then we can inform all participants regarding that. Further questions, we are open for questions, so don't be shy. And if you'd like to use this chance, please do it. Also because questions are the only thing that is missing when we then provide you with the recording. So there are still questions that you ask throughout the web to ask any new one. So it's actually
Michael, I don't know if you lost the connection, but I cannot hear you anymore. I don't know if the participants can. I see that you're playing with the Wi-Fi. Maybe you're trying to connect again. I don't know, but I cannot hear anything anymore. I don't know if the others can. Now I can see you. Would you like me to read the questions? Because I can read them and maybe I can try to reply. Michele, you can nod if you hear me. No? Well, I will keep going and maybe read the questions. Would that work? Maybe you cannot hear me.
Okay, I am back now, finally. My apologies.
I
Can
can
you hear
hear
me
you.
now? See?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no clue about what happened, but I'm finally back. My apologies for that. I don't know whether you were answering to the questions. Do you have any studies on the enforcement? And then we have further questions.
Yes, okay. About enforcement, that's even more complicated because the data are out there, and they're not easy to find. Actually, in our opinion, a great idea for a follow-up study would be exactly that, finally putting in order all the different practices in the member states, which are not the same. There is not the same level of awareness. There is a certain level of harmonization, but you know very well that this does not allow a uniform enforcement in all the territory of the European Union. So the short answer is not yet, but maybe in the future that would be an amazing project to focus on.
Then the next question is, did you consider farm-saved seeds related to plant variety rights holders benefit?
Okay, so farm-safe seeds are not in the scope of this study. They do respond more to the interests of farmers, and there are very limited exception that allows farmers of certain crops to reissue in their own holding protected varieties. No, so it's a limitation, it's a derogation from the scope of the varieties established by Article 14 of the Basic Regulation. So in this case, indeed, as you mentioned, as you seem to suggest, I'm not very sure about it, but indeed, the mechanism of farm-safe seeds also allows as an impact on the economy of the European Union, and of course on the economy of farmers who have the possibility to access higher quality plant varieties and then reuse them in their farm. In some cases, not even paying royalties. No, and when it comes to small farmers. So, short answer again: the scope is not in the study, but it is an impact on the EU economy that may be explored, taken into consideration. Yes.
Thank you. And can you explain the method used to obtain the figures that you
Yes.
showed?
It really depends. It's actually a combination of several methods that people specialized in statistics and economics are able to explain in a better way. In any case, the methodology is also very well explained in the study. It really depends on the figure that you're relating to. For instance, the imagining scenarios where plant breedings never happen is not the same approach as counting what is the origin or the dimension of the CPVR holder. So I really invite you to consult the second section of the study on the methodology applied.
And then question number 6, the benefits of the system expressed in percentages are calculated only for the UCPVR system. They do not take into account individual national protection, right?
That's correct. However, there is a we do take into consideration national listing, no, to see what is protected and what is not. But in general, yes, you're absolutely right. We allow the consultation first of the register of the CPVU.
Great. At the moment, we have no further question. I'm not sure whether you heard me before or I was just talking to myself, more likely the latter. However, I was I was saying that basically, in case, for example, you should have questions popping out after the webinar has taken place, and after we close the webinar, you're very welcome then to address your questions to the European IP Help Desk helpline, and we will then do our best to answer to your question. I also mentioned that, of course, this is pretty much a unique opportunity to ask your questions, actually, because questions are the only thing you cannot do then with the recording coming up and watching the recording later on, because you cannot ask questions to a recorded voice. So I was then urging you to ask questions at the moment, because it's a very good chance you have, which, yes, is going to come back, but only next year with the next upcoming webinars and the collaboration with the CPVO. So we still have quite a few minutes to go. Therefore, perhaps if my connection allows me, I'm going to take advantage of the time together just to quickly show you the next upcoming webinars. As you can see, we still have quite an amount of them. Tomorrow we're going to be here with Impact Innovation in EU funded projects and Eugene Sweeney. And then the 8th of December, the collaboration with the EPO is going to go further. And we will then go on to the 14th with patents and innovation, 15th of December, and then our winter schedule is going to be done. If you'd like, however, we're going to be very happy to host you at these next upcoming webinars. I see there are no questions at the moment, so I would then thank you all very much for the time that you have spent together with us. Apologize for the couple of technical issues that we have, but still they haven't prevented us from sharing information and being together also this morning. The biggest thank you, of course, goes to Sissi. Thank you very much for being here and for the very interesting presentation. I hope you can hear me now. It's always a yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of presenting this study.
It was a pleasure. And then see you soon. And to all participants who are not going to be part of the next upcoming webinar, also, again, a very lovely Christmas and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as well.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.